Well, hey, welcome. Welcome to, what is our title again?
Unspoken Job of Worship.
There it is. Okay. Make sure you were all paying attention. Today's going to be fun. So, my name is Noland Gilmore. I am worship pastor at, hey, Jonathan. Somebody said the Jonathan. There you go. Thanks, ladies. My name is Noland Gilmore, worship leader, worship pastor at Antioch, Salt Lake City. Been there for 4.5 years almost. What's up, Adam?
What's going on?
So the vision that was given to me for this breakout session is, what did you not expect when you're jumping into being a worship leader as far as sound goes, and all the responsibilities and all the ins and outs, and what did you do when you didn't know what to do, I guess, and that's why Blanton's here. Because that's what I did. I called Blanton. So 4.5 years ago, we started Antioch, Salt Lake City. We had, I'm going to give you a bunch of details on us and kind of give you our story. This whole thing is going to be a bunch of Q&A, and I'm going to direct a lot of it to Blanton. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background history of myself, and then Blanton, some background, some history, and then we'll jump into some question asking, because that's when I think we learn the most, is when we can ask questions and have our direct questions answered, hopefully in some form or fashion. So we moved out to Salt Lake City. We had nothing when it comes to a soundboard, anything. It was like me on an acoustic guitar, someone on a cajon, and some people that could sing. Jessica, you know Jessica Hannon? She plays violin. She was on our team. So we were like the most folky, trendy little worship conglomerate this side of the Mississippi, and so we moved out, and then I was basically told, hey, you need to go buy a sound system, and I just was like, yeah. Well, what do we do? Like, what does that mean? And what do we need? Do we need in-ears? Do we not need in-ears? Do we need, let's just do floor monitors? No, let's not do floor monitors. Do we buy things for the future? Do we buy things? Yeah. And so we were given a budget. Let me give you all the numbers of like 20 grand to like go off and just do it all. And it was like the biggest blessing on the planet and the scariest thing and the fear of the Lord when someone hands you like a number, like slides a number over, like in negotiations, and you're like, that's my number. And so I panicked, honestly. I had no idea what to do. I called Johanna 6 immediately, because we left around the same time. She's in Antioch, Fullerton. And then I think the greatest thing I can probably tell you is, please ask questions. If you don't know what you're doing, which I still don't know what I'm doing day in and day out, there are moments where I'm like, I call people. I have a text chain with friends and people that I trust. I am hopefully I feel like I have a big question asker. And so I asked a bunch of questions, and I ended up calling Blanton, and I was like, Blanton, I talked to Johanna, is this right? And he goes, well, that's exactly what I told Johanna to do. And so like Johanna had already called Blanton and said, what do I do in this scenario? And so we talked about it, and my trade did not go through my fantasy football, in case you're wondering. I'm so sorry. And so we kept this dialogue open about sound, and he sent me an Excel spreadsheet of what to buy and what to do. And I basically started this journey of learning, because I didn't know anything about sound. And who would say like they know sound equipment like pretty well? Anyone? Yeah? It's okay if you do. Like, Jonathan, I know you do. Thank you. You're from Salt Lake City. And so it's just not a thing you're ever asked to do as a worship leader, ever. Like, you're actually told not to touch it. Like, when we joked, we came in and Blanton was like, we even let the worship leaders touch things. I'm like, that's so true. We're not allowed in that booth. Wherever that booth is, it might be a table this size, or it's like a full-on booth. We're not allowed to touch it. Yeah.
Well, I grew up, my dad is a worship leader.
Yeah.
He was also a sound guy. And my problem was, all I cared about was playing music.
100%.
I was with him for 5 years.
Yeah.
His team. I didn't care one bit about learning that stuff.
Why would you?
And now that I'm in this position, I'm like, why did I not learn this
Right.
stuff from him? So,
100%.
yeah.
It is. Well, it's just confusing.
Yes.
But you're always on this side of the
Much
speakers,
pressure.
you know.
100%.
You can't be in two places at once.
This is how I like to give seminars. We all do it together. Mutual submission. I like this. So we get out to Salt Lake City. We're learning how to literally plug in this cable, run this cable, our first sound guy was a 3M tape salesman who'd never touched a soundboard in his life. And so we literally sat behind a YouTube video for about 2 hours. We watched it. This is on Saturday before our Sunday service.
Wow.
And so he's now a lawyer. He has nothing to do with sound. It's Simeon Brown, who doesn't know anything about sound still to this day. Like, he knows what it's supposed to sound like and he knows how the buttons push, but he doesn't know waves, like sound waves, frequencies, EQ. Like, he's still kind of like that fourth, fifth rotation guy that you're like, hey Sim, can you come sit back behind there and just recall the last scene from last Sunday? That'd be great. And so we took our lumps early on, not knowing what we're doing, but one of the biggest things was we learned to ask questions, and we learned to ask the right questions quickly. Because when you don't ask the right questions, you just kind of end up being in a cycle of like, that didn't answer it. And so oftentimes we don't ask the right questions, we just kind of stop asking questions. Have you ever done that? It's like, I didn't get the answer I wanted, so I just kind of stopped. That's what I did for a little bit. And so we had, I'll tell you one issue. So we had the Behringer X32. Does anyone know if they have that in their church?
We have the compact version.
Compact, sure. Yeah. So it's a board made by Behringer. They also own the company Midas. So if you have a Midas board, it's the same thing, just better preamps. And it has a feature on there, like a recording feature. You put a little thumb drive, which we all know and love and see. You put it in there. Well, ours was having like tons of issues. So I called one person that I knew and trusted, and I asked a bunch of questions, and they're like, yeah, you got to do this, this, and this, and it worked for a week, and then it stopped working. But I was so embarrassed that I didn't have the answer. I had to come to my pastor 2 weeks in a row and say, the sermons didn't record. And that's just like heartbreaking as a worship leader. Like, your pastor puts in all this work and effort and to lead our church and to create resources for your people in the first year of the church, and you go, yeah, bro, we only have one service, and that one didn't catch. You didn't record. And so I stopped asking questions because I asked the wrong questions.
You could have been like, hey, the board that Blanton said to buy.
100%.
Not record.
100%. And so I learned quickly after, I can't remember if it was you or Owen, but they just kind of said, well, what questions are you asking? And have you thought about, basically trying to figure out what works? Because I don't know if you guys, I'm insecure when it comes to sound, when it comes to things that I don't know about. And it's one thing to try to put on a happy face and like, sure, yeah, let's talk about the channels in this digital snake that runs in the Ethernet cord. And I think I'm on track right now. And it plugs into the AEOS50A port.
Sure.
And I don't know that, and so I start to feel like super insecure, and so I stopped asking questions. And so I think it was Owen. He was like, you got to get over your insecurity, because like, you're called to lead people, and you're called to search and to dive in, to find out the things you need to find out to lead the people in the way that you're supposed to lead them, in the way you're called to lead them. So okay. So I started asking better questions and figured out there's actually a much easier way for us. We record now directly out of the back of the XR or X32 into a computer into GarageBand, and it works great. And it's like, hey, now it's on my computer. I don't have to pull it from a thumb drive. Simple fix, but I never knew to ask the question. This isn't a tutorial on GarageBand or X32s. I'm just letting you know we have to find the ability to, one, get over our insecurity if we ask the wrong questions, because you're going to ask the wrong questions, and we can't allow our insecurity to hold back the growth and potential of the worship team and what God's trying to do in your church. That makes sense? So I learned to ask a lot of questions. Blanton is someone I often called in the first year, and I remember pulling over many times and saying, Blanton, I don't know what to do. Help me. How do I do this? And it wasn't like desperate, but we had a lot of back and forth conversations. And one of the things he told me, and so this is why I got really scared with having a $20,000 budget, or however much money your budget is. You want to steward that well, right? So I asked Blanton, I was like, what do I do? And he sent me a spreadsheet. And I said, Blanton, that's a lot of money. That's really expensive. That mic alone costs this, this, and this. And he said, Nolan, buy once, cry once. And I was like, what does that mean? he's like, you buy it once, and it's expensive, and it's a lot, and you're going to cry over it. It's gonna, because you can't believe you just spent $400 on a kick mic, or whatever it is, or like you actually spent $600 on your handheld that you're going to use week in and week out. And he was like, at that point, you've cried, you've bought it, but that's it. Like, it's not gonna break in a week. It's not gonna break in a year. It has so basically, I got this value early on, and I'm about to hand it off to Blanton, of buying once and crying once. So basically, everything that we do as worship leaders, because we might not have the right background and sound, we might not understand how everything works, but what we can do is ask really good questions and make sure that the quality in which we're delivering our church is to a standard in which we'll persevere through all the setup and tear down and all the things. Because what I want to do is go like, does that mic work? Okay, great. I'll just buy it. Like, because I know I can understand it. I can look at a $90 mic and go, I know how this works. Like, you plug it in and it's done. It's not wireless. It doesn't do all these things. And I just learned early on from Blanton that it's better to do something. Maybe it's a little outside of your own spectrum as a worship leader, so you have to ask more questions. But it's going to better the church down the road because you took time to get rid of the insecurity, saying, God, what do you have for our church? I might be outside of my box. I'm going to bring other people in, and I'm going to try to make the best decision for our church going forward. And that was super helpful for me. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and you're going to give me a couple answers, and then we're going to open up for Q&A.
Talk about insecure, like the techie guy talking to a bunch of worship people.
We're in awe of you, Blanton. Absolutely in awe of you. So first off, in 2 minutes or less, share your story about how you got into sound in the church. And the reason why we're asking you this question is because you have a unique story. You didn't always want to do sound. You didn't always have this aspiration to be the sound guy of a 5,000 person church. And
I never had that aspiration, really.
right, and maybe you still don't. So, but I think it helps us from hearing your stories. I think it's going to help us kind of maybe open up some new ideas for what we can learn going forward.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I felt like I had to write out my testimony almost of like how.
Won't return void, bro.
Start out. What's that?
It's not going to return void. You got
it. That's right. How I came to Jesus and like how that involved music, and then how I kind of got into this tech world, which I never really aspired to. I loved computers when I was a kid, but that was about it. I came to Jesus when I was a senior in high school, which was in 1990. So yes, I'm old. I'm okay with that. And then I was at a charismatic Episcopal church. If you know, you can get a picture.
There's like one of those, right?
Yeah. And it's not around anymore. But anyway, I joined the praise team.
Yeah, you did.
And in college I learned how to play guitar. I had learned I had played violin when I was in middle school, and so I was in music, and I was just like, I want to learn how to play guitar because I had been a counselor at a Christian camp, and it was like, that's how you like worship Jesus was. You get the acoustic guitar and you sing your heart out, right? And I love doing that. And so our church had this cool heritage from the 70s of like this coffee shop. So charismatic Episcopal thing, plus like think 70s folk coffee shop.
Yes.
Like you can get that vibe, right?
I'm into that.
So the youth, it kind of was on the decline, but the youth were like, hey, this is a cool spot to be in. So we would do, when I was in the youth, which since I was a senior was only a short time, and then after, when I was in college, I hung around because our youth leader had asked me to hang around and kind of help out. I was like, we need to worship Jesus. And I had helped, and I was helping with lead worship in big church, but I would also help lead worship in youth, and then we would bring in bands or like I played electric guitar also, so we would do sort of a worship band thing in this coffee house, which was a little sketchy because it had like a PV 6-channel board with like wood sides. I don't know if you like vintage. And I didn't know anything about sound, and I was like, okay, sort of like you were saying, like happy that it made sound,
Yes, yeah.
right? Like, okay, I think I can hear voices. Okay, good, we're good. Turn up the electric guitar amp, bass amp, right? And then drums are loud on their own, fine, okay. So anyway, kind of got involved in that and was leading worship. We also had this, I just was thinking about this the other day. We had like this Jesus hour kind of thing that we did. It was like once a month. But we would just do worship for like a couple of hours. And I remember I would lead with another guy who was like the official music pastor. And those are just awesome times. Like learning all kinds of things about your instrument, about leading worship. And then basically, where did I go from there? We had some issues with the coffee shop. I was just basically like trying to figure things out. So at the church where I was at, I kind of was like, okay, how does that soundboard work in the back that's got like, knobs like this deep and this wide? Like, how do you know, the stereotypical sound person question, like, how do you know what all those knobs do kind of thing?
Right.
So I started basically learning that because I felt like, hey, I can make it sound better, right? I mean, it's just a noble thought. You're like, okay, I can make this sound better.
For sure.
And it was a long time till it sounded better, but I learned a lot of things along the way, and I asked questions like you're talking about. There were sound people that I was learning from, and surprise of surprises, I was like, I'm gonna get the manual, because in those days we had paper manuals. Just like read through the manual, and I was like, wow, this tells you how to use this knob. Like, what does this knob do? And I was like, man, this is mind blowing. So then it was like, okay, I know the EQ changes the sound, but then you're like, okay, wait, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound good. Okay, I don't know,
Yeah.
So anyway, learned a lot of things through asking questions, reading manuals, and things like that. And that's kind of how I got started on the sound deal. But really started with worship, and I preached the sermon of like tech people are worship people too,
Amen.
right?
Amen.
We're like the extra member of the band, or another member of the band.
There you go.
Extra sounds kind of sort of on the side, in the back, right?
Extra special.
But anyway, we have our own special place.
That's good.
So
That's great.
I don't know if that was 2 minutes, but there you go.
It wasn't, and that's okay. We'll learn about feedback later.
That's in that one.
Yeah, we all need to slow. Yeah, no, that's good. One thing that hearing you talk, Blanton, I think is that asking questions piece is so key, and because we can't, who knows, like, you're never going to figure it all out. You're never going to know everything you're supposed to know about a certain equipment, about your own craft as a vocalist. Like, we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always developing. And so I think if you, as a worship leader or as a member of the band or even a sound person, if you can take on that hat of like, and that mantle of I am going to press in and I'm going to learn, I think that is the best place you can be as a worship leader, because it's going to serve your church and it's going to serve your team, and it's going to show your sound man or woman that they are valued and that you want to learn from them. And so there's this like, I don't know, I've just found when you go super low, there's like this weird dynamic of like, I'm the worship leader and you're the sound guy and we're at odds. Like, anyone ever experienced that? Not like in a bad way, but like you're telling me to like turn it down. Like, how many times I've been in so many sessions where you're like, James Mark, you can't do that. And you're like, James Mark is like, well, Blanton, I want to do that. And it's like, well, you can't. And he's like, but you don't understand. I'm going to do it. And he's like, well, let's figure out a way. So it just, anyone? Okay, great. So, like, we had an issue on Sunday. It's like, hey, you can't play those cymbals out loud. It's like, well, I don't know how else to bring it down. I'm trying so hard, not me, our drummer, I'm trying so hard to bring it down, right? And it's like, and so one of our other band members stepped in. He was like, hey, I've got an idea, or we're problem solving. So like there's this that we just changed our baffles and we just angled them differently, so it was all fine. But this being able to interact, and I think if the worship leader goes first, sorry, this is what I'm trying to get to. The worship leader goes first and saying, hey, I want to learn from you, sound person, and I'm gonna like really submit to what you think is best. I'm the bottom line leader as responsible for how this Sunday goes, but I'm gonna actually submit to Blanton right here and say, Blanton, I'm gonna trust you because I don't know. Unless and maybe that's not how you guys do it here, but that's how I'm like, I think James Mark, from what I've experienced, says, okay, Blanton, I trust you, and let's figure out a way for us to do this together instead of me just being like, hey, from the front, I don't care, Blanton, what that sounds like, this is what I'm gonna do. It says, Blanton, I'm gonna trust you. And that one gives Blanton a ton of confidence to run and a ton of belief in his leadership, in his leader, who's James Mark, to say, I trust you. I trust you that you would even say that to me. And so I think we're deepening working relationships. We're deepening the ability to run farther as a team because we trust each other. So asking questions and not being too afraid to.
I think, treating your sound person or your tech team or whatever as a band member.
Yeah.
Because you would do the same thing, I hope, with your band members. But I think it was interesting, you mentioned that, like, here's your number. I feel like when James Mark or some worship leader is like, okay, how do you want me to do that? They're like sliding that check across the table, and then I feel like, whoa, I've got a lot of responsibility to figure this out.
Right.
Like, it's not like heavy, but like, okay, the trust has been placed on me, so I need to figure this out. And that's where I start being like, hey, tech people, what do you do in this situation, kind of thing.
That's good.
And really, it's our job to, the way I approach it is, it's our job to come up with solutions. It's not our job, Scotty in the old Star Trek is like always telling Captain Kirk, like, it can't be done, I can't change the laws of physics, in his Scottish accent. But, really the thing is, like, when we come up against a problem, butting heads is not going to solve that problem, right? But I appreciate it when the leader is like saying, okay, tell us what to do,
right?
And then I feel like, okay, I'll figure that out and let you know. Instead of like feeling like we got to be at odds, And sometimes that gap from the booth to the stage
it's a lot of space.
Is the longest walk.
It is such a long space.
There have been times when, back in the wedge days,
wedge monitors, floor monitors.
We're
all learning about
I would be like, Nolan's over there, and I'm over here turning knobs, and I'm like, his monitor is so loud. Like, all we can hear is your monitor. And so we're far away, and he's like, but I can't hear whatever, my voice, my guitar. And I'm like, so I would just be like, okay, time to humble myself. Let me put myself in his shoes. And I'm going to go walk over there and be like, okay, let me listen to what this sounds like. Like, I'm literally putting my head next to him. And I'm like, okay, the keyboard is way too loud in your monitor. Okay, got it. Sometimes that walk is the longest walk, but as tech people, we have that trust placed in us. You're like, hey, I just need to hear, right? So it's my job to make sure you can hear, and not just keep,
And a lot of you are probably thinking, well, we don't have Blanton. Anyone else feel that way? I feel that way sometimes. Like, we don't have Blanton. Like, we don't have the guy that has done this for 1 million years, and he just feel like he knows it all. Like, he's Yoda, and he can just go in and fix it, and going with the Star Wars, Star Trek theme. And so what do you do with people that you don't know if they even know what they're doing? Anyone have a sound situation where you're like, I don't know if you know what you're doing, and isn't that raising up leaders? Like, isn't that just what it is? Like, it's not different. Like, I think that's something that we have to do as worship leaders and band members, is to humble ourselves and say, I didn't know what I was doing at one point. And so what am I doing to give them the resources to learn? Spoiler alert, it probably doesn't need to come from you. Like, don't put it on you to learn all these things just to teach them something, because you're probably not going to learn it in the time in which they need to learn it. So who are you reaching out to? Let's let's just call it what it is, 21st century. Like, yeah, we're still in the 21st century. Great. YouTube helps. YouTube helps a lot. Like, there are things I send a lot of my vocal coaching tips to YouTube. I'm like, hey, vocalists, let's go to YouTube. Hey, sound guys, here's some resources. MXU, it's a great resource for sound. If you on Instagram, is that what it's called?
MixU.
MixU.
MixU.rocks is their URL.
Okay, and super helpful stuff when it comes to EQ, when it comes to what the blend in a room, what gear to use. They're just really cool dudes. And so I think being able to say, am I giving my team what they need? And it doesn't just go for your electric guitarist or your vocalist. That your interaction with your sound person will go a long way, for sure. Blanton, another question on here is, philosophically, so I always love to start my questions off that way. Which it took me like 3 times to spell it, so thank God for the internet and autocorrect. What lens should we be looking through when either we're like getting started buying equipment? So most of you, is anyone like just now getting off the ground? Okay, great, perfect. So, or maintaining and growing our current system. Who still has equipment that they probably shouldn't be using, but they're using because it's what they have? Many times 12. Like, I need even music stands, y'all. Like, there's some things.
Speaker stands.
Sure, like so. What lens should we be looking through when we're trying to grow or maintain and then grow our system?
Yeah. I like to buy once, cry once.
It's so good.
I feel like it's an investment.
Right.
You know, here we're at, like, the first question you're asking is, how does this serve the church?
Right.
And you can't say, I had someone text me the other day, literally the other day, and they were like, hey, I need some new speakers for my room, but I can only spend $900 a piece, which sounds like a lot of money when you don't know, like, the room, right? So I was like, okay, well, that kind of feels backwards, because it's like, you're going to use your speakers for, let's say, the next 5 years.
Right.
You know, speakers like what are hanging here, some of those are probably the original ones we bought 8 years ago. And surprise, when you buy better stuff, it sounds better, right? And here's the thing about the PA or the public address system, the loudspeaker system, is everything you have goes through that. So if that's your bottleneck, if that is a piece of something, yes, guess what your sound will sound like.
That's right.
I'm not saying, hey, you better spend millions of dollars or thousands or whatever. I'm just saying you're making an investment, and PA is one of the biggest things I would say that is critical. If you buy the right PA, everything is going to sound good. If you can't get, the latest whatever track from Bethel, Elevation, Hillsong, whatever, which sounds amazing, to play through your system and sound good, something's wrong, right? You're like, okay, we either need a new room or we need a new PA. You're probably not going to get a new room, so there are some things you can do with that. But if it doesn't sound good through your PA, nothing will sound good through your PA, right? So I think,
question.
yeah,
PA meaning just like your main
public
speakers?
address, yeah, mains, your
Mains.
loudspeaker system. Sorry, I tried to define that, but I just flew past it. Yeah, your mains, your loudspeaker system. So really, it's more like, what are the things that are critical to invest in, right? Sometimes you're going to just be like, okay, we're going to buy this for now, and later we'll buy good stuff.
We'll put it in the youth room.
Exactly. We have done that.
Great.
We've lived that.
Right.
But I will say that the original speakers that were bought before I got here in 1999, 20 years ago, I still have them, and that's our wedding system. So if someone's like, hey, I have a wedding, I want to, people on staff, we let them take a system. I'm like, you can do whatever you want with this, and it's not going to sound amazing, but it sounds fine. So just take this away. But that was an initial investment.
Right.
When we were a church of 450 people,
Right.
it was huge for us.
Right.
But it was the right thing.
Right.
So loudspeaker system is a critical factor in, that's like, everything has to, did I make my point? I
Yeah.
keep riffing on this, I just feel strong about it.
Can you call the elders of my church and kids? Just kidding.
Give me a phone number. I would be happy to preach this all day, every day.
Yeah, we're almost done. We're gonna have 20 minutes for
Is
Q&A.
it on the budget issue of
Yeah.
making purchases?
Yeah, it's
Right.
good.
Good question.
Also, don't neglect the possibilities of used gear. And I think I already talked about what's the bottleneck of the system. But I want to qualify what I said something earlier when I said, like, you know, we just need to use this for now. Still, you don't. Sounds weird maybe, but I would rather buy good used equipment than like brand new junk.
Yeah. Good.
A mic stand is a great example.
Right.
We have some mic stands that have been around for 18 years.
That's awesome.
We have some that died in the first year.
Yep.
K&M is what everyone uses on tour. It's only like $70 a mic stand, which sounds like, oh my gosh. German engineering, I guess, costs a lot of money. But those things last. Now, sometimes things are expensive and you're like, that should have lasted longer.
Right.
But mic stands are one of those things that, like, if you're a portable church, you're throwing it in your trunk every week, it's gonna just die if you don't buy good stuff. But that is an investment. Did we talk about the mic stands?
Yeah, like, so, for example, we bought K&M. Just a heads up, they still die. Like, but there's 5-year warranty on a mic stand, and then they also have every part's replaceable and buyable. Like, so, and like the parts are like $3 to $5 max. So instead of replacing a whole mic stand, you either have a 5-year warranty where it can all be replaced, or you go buy a little piece for $3 and you fix your mic stand.
We have had tons
Yeah.
and tons. We still have some
K&M's
original
great.
mic stands. It's like, compared to Guitar Center mic stands,
Yeah.
don't bother.
Can I speak to that real fast, and then we'll start the
Go ahead.
Q&A? One thing that I've learned, and maybe you're too far down the road, but I don't think you are. Find someone local that you can, and I know we've kind of talked about this in the beginning. I found a huge benefit in finding a local company that can, and this isn't like a buy local because it's 2019 and like put it on your Instagram, like because it's fresh, I don't know, water, I don't know, has best friends. That's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm saying buy local because of the access that you have to equipment, relationship, and the ability to really get what you want when you need it on a time crunch. Obviously, Amazon's great. You can get anything on Amazon. I use Amazon still. But literally, they're also great for like brainstorming and resources. So I use these guys called Performance Audio in Salt Lake City. They're like right down the street from my office, and they do sound. I've rented things from them. So finding a company that you can like brainstorm off of, I ask them a ton of questions. How does DMX work? Like, if you've never done lighting and you're trying to like try DMX, like, is this 3-prong? Is this 5-prong? Is this, or 5-pin? Excuse me. So like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, and so I ask a ton of questions, and having a professional locally that you can ask questions and they can get you the part, and you build enough relationship with them that you can have them come out and help you install it. It's so helpful. Instead of going like, I call Sweetwater in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they're like, hey, we can have that to you soon, quick, and they're great, and a lot of them love Jesus and they're awesome, or calling, someone else, Amazon, like that personal connect isn't there, and like the ability to ask questions, and they know, like local people will know your system, know your situation, be able to kind of help you. Maybe it's a pipe dream for some of you, and I'm sorry, that's just been super helpful for us. If you can find it in your city, go for it. Really reach out, try to draw a connection there, and take advantage of those friendships. So,
I was going to say, in Waco, we just have, the last couple of years, have a company that I would actually go to and be like, hey, could you like fix this system?
Right.
Or not because but like customer service wise, they seem good. I've talked to several of their customers and they don't know everything, but like we just need help with just the vast amount of stuff we have to do. So we're between Dallas and Austin, though, and there are several companies, I'm sure, in both places that would be great candidates for that. So I buy a lot of stuff from Dallas, a place in Dallas called Sound Productions, and they have a warehouse in Dallas. They can ship it to me ground. I talk to them about whatever, you know, like what are people buying these days for whatever.
Right.
I ask questions,
Yeah,
you know. I can't afford to research everything to
yeah.
death. I think I also, like, part of the tech track idea here is that we're resourcing each other and we have relationship with each other. Like there are several guys who came in and were like, hey, we're doing this now, and I'm like, wow, I need to learn from them.
Right.
You know? That's what community, that's the strength of relationship and
Yeah.
community.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Cool. All right. We have 20 minutes. Ask any question is in regards to what we talked about. If you want to ask about marriage, it's fine.
Yeah, about the marriage.
Yeah, go for it.
No, so I'm typically the person that does a lot of. I'm not our main worship director. I'm like the associate worship director.
Yeah.
And so I'm usually the one that's doing all the shopping.
Yes.
Of like finding the stuff.
Yes.
And so we have a fairly limited budget every year. It's like roughly $2,000.
Okay. Yeah.
To buy stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so my idea is that we're gonna every year buy like a big purchase to kind of keep building up what we have. Do you have a priority, like when you're looking at like what's the next thing we should buy to improve our setup? Do you have like a priority of like we need to make sure we upgrade this, then this, then this?
Yep.
So like do you have kind of a thought process with that?
Yeah.
Just generally, not
Are you portable or?
portable.
Okay. Are you, how big?
Church size wise?
Yeah.
It's weird if that's
Well, let's say venue
between
wise.
just over 200.
Okay, so you have a service that's 200 people, one service?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say, well, I think I mentioned PA, loudspeaker system is kind of like a critical aspect of, you know, your system, obviously. Do you separate out like expenses and capital? Like, okay, supplies and strings and all that stuff from, and gaff tape from like, I'm gonna buy this big piece of equipment?
It's all in the same budget.
Okay.
So,
So one thing that helped us was splitting those out.
okay.
So like when you need to make a big purchase, Becky, we've just been talking about this. You basically go, I don't know what the church government structure is or whatever, but like, are you going to the elders and kind of making the presentation? So I visited their deal and I was like, okay, here's my recommendation. And so PA was one of the things. Are you splitting out band? What we do here is we split out band stuff from like sound stuff.
No, we're not quite there.
Okay, that's fine.
Like I bought both like a brand new drum set for the church last year, and then a couple other stuff that were like tech stuff. So it's
Okay.
it's all in the same budget.
So like if you had $2,000 for tech stuff, that'd be different than $2,000 for
Yeah.
instruments and
Sounds
strings and frappuccinos and whatever.
It's not for everything.
Yes, exactly. Those aren't necessary. Okay, so 200 people. I would say if you're PA, you don't at least like your PA. That is a critical.
Okay.
I mean, I could preach all day about like if you don't have a good PA, and I'll say these cabinets. The thing I like about this, and this is now an older system, it was like revolutionary when it came out. I don't know about revolutionary, but it was great because you could basically just add cabinets to and make your PA bigger, which is unusual. Usually you have to be like, okay, well that's for the youth system now.
Right.
We got to buy a bigger system.
Right.
So we actually have 8 of these. You see the 4 hanging from the array frames over here. I like these a lot because they're QSE KLA 12. So sorry for the techno babble, but they sound good. They have a good like setup for a portable type deal, without getting into all the technical things. PA. If you can't listen to your PA in your room and be like, I like how it sounds with a good track, start
that's
there.
good.
I think one of the PAs are fairly new and they're working pretty good.
Okay, you're happy with it?
We're happy with that. I think the next thing we want to do, we have one sub.
Okay,
And so I think we either want to get one more sub just to boost our
right?
low ends because it's like super thin.
Okay, yeah.
But other than that, like kind of like the mapping out what we can do.
Yeah, I would say subs are a part of the PA.
Okay.
Just keep in mind, when you add a sub, you're like slightly increasing the sound. Every time you double the number of subs, you slightly increase the sound. So it gets expensive. So that's why, like, speaking of subs, I like these subs. These are very powerful, compact. Look, they roll.
Those are the ones we have, yeah.
KW181, they're great. And so there are ways to like place them in better ways versus not as good ways. Like if you space them out, that can be a problem actually. If you put them together, it can work better. And then when you double again, there's other ways to like make the sub energy push out into the room instead of like, it radiates just omnidirectionally. So you're wasting a lot by sending it to the stage, right? I mean, your bassist liked it, but you really want it to be out there, right? So there are ways to deal with that too.
That's good.
I'm trying to do two really quick. One for on the mobile side, being mobile church, primary context. What's been most challenging? We're in a rhythm on Sunday. We have a certain size gathering, but our staff has really tried to push, like we're having these other more informal gatherings, but then they're asking the band to be there and they're asking us to set things up, and it's in a different location each week.
Ouch.
And we're pulling random equipment, and so our Sunday mornings feel kind of fleshed out.
Yeah.
Like we have a rhythm to it, and like the setup.
You steal from like your trailer kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like, but the Sunday morning's too big.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fully set that up
Right.
for these other small gatherings. And these other small gatherings, you have this weird soundboard we found that's like crunchy when you move, and it's just yeah, like, oh man. And so, and we're in a different space each week because we're renting and we're like, we might be using someone else's sound system. We have no idea. So, I guess for the more smaller gatherings, do you have any suggestions how to navigate that? And my second question is more pastoral, about getting low and honoring the sound person. I love it. I don't know how that culture translates to the rest of the team, because some of the musicians have still been trying to like encourage them, like, hey, like let's listen, like let's get low, and they're still just like, I still can't hear my ears. This person doesn't know what they're doing. There's kind of so building that culture of humility. I don't know if you have any tips on that, but.
Well, the first question is easy. Do you want to take a swing at the second one?
Yeah. So I think it's discipleship. I think it is. I think if you can't go, not. This is me being pastoral, trying to be pastoral right now.
Great.
I think the goal is to, as we follow Jesus, if we can't submit to people who don't have it all figured out, then we probably have a problem with ourselves. Like no one has it figured out. So the moment we say you don't know what you're doing, therefore I will not submit to you, that's a heart problem. And so I think we have to say, okay, Jesus, you've put that person in place of authority for that realm, just like you put me in place of authority for this realm. I might know a little bit more. Let's just be real by what they're thinking. I might know more about my instrument than they know about theirs. But there was a point in time where I didn't know as much as I know now. And so God, would you help me give them the grace? And so I think that's just like, that's just life. And I think that's, you got your work cut out for you, because you know we deal with people, and we deal with the mess of people waking up at 6 a.m. to get there, and they had to, you know, their baby woke up at 5 and they had to feed them, and then they had to get out the door, and then their wife's mad because they forgot to leave put the trash out. And you know, I'm trying to think of all the things that happened in my life, and I'm like, and my wife's like, I love you so much, don't ever do that again. And I'm like, wait, hold on, I'm trying to like do all these things. So I think and honestly giving people the benefit of the doubt at times too, and say, hey, I get that. I think that's a huge deal too, is to come low with them and just and to kind of model it for them. And instead of saying like, hey, get up to my level, so that like I know how to go low, so come low with me, which is like not going low.
Right.
And so, say, I understand. I get that. I feel that at times too. And then show so that you're right now you're modeling going low. And then, able to disciple it. Hopefully, yeah. That's my thought.
That's good.
I would say on the console thing, if you have, so I kind of have this philosophy of like, if I find something that works, I just like hammer on that thing hard. I'm like, okay, I found this thing. Okay, let me see how all the different ways I can use this thing. So we have the X32, which is, we have several back there. And I am pretty sure you guys have the X32 because I've been there.
For Sunday, the big one.
Right. They make, see the one on the left there with the screen facing us? They make a small version of that. Now the beauty of that is if the person knows the big one, it's the same software. So that makes it easier and it's smaller. So there are ways to deal with that kind of stuff. Did y'all use mobilechurch.com or like how did you do your portable deal? Has anybody else used them? Or somebody like
We
them?
use the portable church.
Portable church? Okay. What do you use?
We have more.
Okay. And they basically figured out like the whole trailer pack, right?
We don't have a trailer. We actually had like the school room actually gives us storage.
Yeah,
it's super nice.
Okay.
Yeah,
we're really
You're one of
liking
those
it.
guys.
Yeah, I know.
I like
I
that.
just roll up to the school and be like, all right, lock the door.
Yeah,
pull it out,
us
here
too,
we go.
man. Us too.
Sweet.
Might as well have our own building.
I love it. It's awesome.
But so much gear will fit in. So that is not in a rack, but you can see on the side it's got little holes, screw holes. So much gear fits in racks, and that's kind of what the world we live in. You can put them on wheels and just roll them out and like run your one cable to the stage. So there are ways to. It costs money, like everything, but like leverage the X32. There are other consoles out there. I'm not saying that the X32 is the best console, which is a common question people like to ask. What's the best console? Like, it depends.
Right.
And that's a stylistic, like, that's a preference thing too, which is totally fine. But I am hammering on the X32 because it really works for a lot of things. And there are things it doesn't work for.
So are you saying you would can I add something that real fast, and I know we have many more questions. You're pulling out of you're going to the trailer or the shed, or are you still in that school? Same school? You still
There's
have
a shed and a trailer.
the shed and the trailer, yeah, in Baton Rouge. So are you pulling from that system from Sundays to take to other events?
We just have a Rubbermaid bin, and it's like, oh, what events? We have college service and young adult this week. Okay, pull these XLRs.
And are they full band? Are they full band as well?
Ish, no,
Ish.
not fully.
We
Like,
have a whole different system.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be.
It might be a good idea to just separate it. It might take some time to build it with budgets and things like that.
Sure.
But we have a system in our discipleship schoolroom in our offices that now we take now. If we have, it's our wedding system. Wedding or like friends. Andrew Rip came through town and he wanted to play a show, and so we took it to like let him use it. Or we just use it for smaller events, college service, young adult service, women's events, men's events, and so, but we never touch our Sunday.
Gotcha.
And so that's been super helpful to not like going back and forth. I left the XLR at the office.
Right.
Or I left, speaker cable. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do y'all feel about the vendor passports?
How do I feel about it? Depends. How big are you talking about? 50 people? 100?
Our practice space is like our office. I'm guessing first we have about ADS room in an office, and we have our passport set up as like our sound system in there. That's
Great.
We use that as our practice room. And
That works.
But that if somebody needs to use a portable system, that's what we give them.
Right.
Our Sunday grandkids. It was funny a while back when I first got to the church. One of our pastors overpromised our sound system to a local organization we partner with. And I was like, dude, no, like please don't give them our one. several $1,000,
Right.
sound system for their little event where they just want to talk.
Right.
Right.
It wasn't a band playing or anything. It was just like a conference. And so I was like, give them the passport. Like they're just talking.
Yeah.
But he had overpromised, and the guy was it was funny because I was like, you just need this, but the guy was actually knowledgeable on sound because he'd been doing sound for years. So it's like, oh yeah, this is a great one. So it's just this weird thing where he's like, I know what you have, and I want it.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah,
Bummer.
from now on we always be like, hey,
Yeah.
take the passport, don't touch this stuff.
But you have like a contained small event system.
Yeah,
For sure.
I would say it's on the small side, and it's good for practice system or like talking.
Yeah.
Sean Jones, who's our youth pastor, just took. He personally owns a passport, and he took it over for his we have these regional conferences, so they had like 50 youth or something. He could play music and lead worship with the guitar. Right?
Great. Love it.
So, if you have a good system in place, I think I'm wondering, how do you develop sound and can mix similar in your process? So we've got one guy that's pretty stellar,
Yeah.
but he volunteers, but all the difference between each person mixing and the way it sounds. So,
Girl,
do you
you
have
speak in my language. Yes, I hear you.
So, a standard, I don't know if you have here's what we would give people if they need to know.
Call Blanton. Call
He
Blanton.
does that all the time.
And have him come out. No, so I would say what we're gonna do this spring, which we're finally gonna do.
I'm sorry, I thought she was asking me.
No, she's not.
Either one's great.
No, put it in your budget. So honestly, we're gonna do this in the spring. We tried to do it last year, and then a lot of things happened.
Stuff happens.
Stuff happened, but I would say bring someone out, whether it's Blanton. I would suggest Blanton, but then come out and say, hey, we're gonna do a tech weekend. We're gonna do a tech weekend, and
Oops, sorry. Hey, at least
this
it's
is
a
the
little
moment
bit.
where we're gonna transition.
Please bow your heads.
Yeah, no. So
As we close tonight.
That's right.
yeah, just kind of get with Blanton. What would it take to get you out there? And can I speak for you on what it takes to get you out there?
Why not?
And basically take care of his flight and feed him. And he from what I've heard, and he probably asked for like $5,000 on top of that.
I don't ask for any. This is part of my job.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So it's like the resource.
It's really more like, can my schedule
Right.
handle it?
Right.
Or AKA, is my boss unhappy because I didn't finish this project or that project?
Right.
So
But I would say that that's something it's in our budget
love
to
doing
do in the spring, and because we have the same issue. I mean, you can even on these digital boards, it's great. You can recall we have like one Sunday service that we're like, please use this one. Don't use the other ones that Bob set up and Josh set up, and because everyone has different things. So one thing I think is getting your one sound guy that you really love and trust. You love them all, but you trust this guy, and have him set it for a Sunday for that room. Save it, and then say every single other sound guy, this is your baseline. This is where you're starting. So if you need to tweak some things, is this okay to say?
go for it.
You hate me for this.
No, I don't.
And so that's
great.
For us. It's been super helpful because then it's given us at least some semblance of consistency, especially for those for your in-ears on stage. The gains are set at the same level every week, and then you're just working with faders and EQ. I'm gonna hand it back over to you to answer anything else.
Where are you from?
Fort Collins, Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Are you
Awesome.
awake?
Yeah.
You drove here.
Yeah.
I flew, but someone drove.
Yeah.
We drove.
There we
Love
go. AK crew.
I got in yesterday. They got in.
I would say I agree with you
Okay, praise God.
on whatever. I agree with you, but I'll take it a step further because I will say one of the challenging aspects, challenging in a good way, in a Jesus way, of my job is I and another guy that worked for me are on staff, and everyone else is volunteer. So it's our job to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So really what we want to do is, so when I want to just I want to mix it and make it my own, that's really not that's not my job anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's
My
good.
job
Good,
is,
good.
so I started that way. I'm the guy, I'm the master, the guru, whatever. I wasn't thinking it that way.
Right.
I just really wanted to excel and do well. And some days, you know, went well and some days didn't. But then after a while, I was like, well, I can't be the guy for everything. So I need to like basically concentrate on training people. So my point is more like your person that's really great, they may love doing it and they may not be good at like, hey, let me show you how to do this. Or they may not feel the authority, you know, which probably is a good thing. If they have the authority, then like people who are good at it as sound people generally aren't like, hey, let me show you how I do all this stuff, right? They're generally not like take the limelight kind of people. But if you recognize excellence, then it should be like, hey, we really recognize you do a great job at this. And so we'd like for you to like do a Sunday and then like help oversee the other Sundays. Now, you're asking a lot of that volunteer, right? So you need to put some parameters on it so he doesn't feel like wiped out or like he doesn't feel supported or whatever. But my point with all that was like I had to make the transition from like I'm the guy who's pushing all the buttons to like I need to empower and equip people to do this job.
Yep.
And now I'm empowering and equipping people to empower and equip people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I feel like I'm on the downhill, especially with like not being able to hear out of one ear and having to mix this morning. But I feel like this is my calling. You know, he's not there yet, and that may not be his calling. But I feel like that first step of like, we love how you do this. Now, can we also say like, hey, can you show people what you know, so that like, and there are ways that you can do standards. Of course, you can do a snapshot and hit recall, and then people can mess it all up. But you can give that person authority to say like, hey, change these things, but not these things. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or there's a lot that goes into a snare sound, right? The snare, the mic, you know, the EQ, compression, where the fader is, drum shield or not, or whatever. So you need that person to be able to sort of recognize like that doesn't sound like the way we normally do it, and let them speak into that. So it's sort of you're kind of calling them up to like if they have that in them, you know, to be able to serve people and kind of bring them along, then maybe that's what they need to do.
And he's kind of doing that already, so we've started developing a team. I think maybe it's the pastoral side of it too, of developing new people. We've got certain people that have a way that they mix and the way that it has to be. So not that they're not teachable, but I don't know how to give more of the handrails to be like, hey, here's what we know we want to have, and developing that into other people and kind of breaking bad habits of the way that we've always done, or the way that it has to be.
Right.
So even if there's like, here's our basic here's what we go for, here's how we do a basic mix consistently, no matter the musicians or the like that basic standard, to almost retrain some other people. So our one guy's great. He's starting to teach and develop, and he has a passion for it, but it's the other ones that have kind of been there, because when you've got people that are willing to serve and they have a heart for it, you want to empower them to do that. But it's how do you train that piece of like, I know you've always done it this way, but here's how and why. And I just don't know if we have a standard like that across the board. I don't know.
What would you do if you had drummers in that situation?
There it is. That's what I was gonna say.
What would I do if I had a drummer?
That wanted to do their own.
You had several drummers,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, this person really plays it the way we want it played.
Yeah.
We have some other drummers too. What would you do in that scenario?
We would have good feedback around it and then develop the standard that we want, is what I would say. So if I ever see a vocalist, which is what I do more than not, if they're like not on, we talk about why they're not there, give them some resources to help them get there, and then track it along the way, encourage it to be processed, but provide a resource. And I guess I just don't know the resource. I don't, because I feel like we have resources within our movement. I know AK calls you all the time with all kinds of things, because we've just got a building, we're growing, we're learning, but it feels like the mix, for me, the mix situation always feels like it changes. Like, I don't know, what is our standard? Do we live mix all the time? Why do vocalists drop out here and this is really loud? But it wasn't that way. Like, I don't understand that standard of, our one guy that does it's great, and he's trying to develop that, but I don't know how you reteach that process to someone.
Yeah, I feel like I am a system guy, like I understand how systems work, and more than sound person or anything, I understand systems. So I would just be like, hey, whatever the guy's name is that you want to sort of replicate, how do you like, what's your system for this, right? Okay, I just recall the snapshot, but obviously it got to a point that you like.
Yeah.
So like, what is your system for this? I mean, I would say it's really similar to instrumentalists or vocalists. You know, you're like giving feedback. You're not on the stage, so you're listening to the mix
I do both.
in the house?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do both. So I sing, but then I'm also on our production team for our church. So I'm constantly aware of
Right.
all that stuff that I have not a very great grip for.
How does, well, you know what sounds good and what doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
You just don't know how it needs to get there, but you don't need to be the expert, like he said, right?
Yeah.
So do you have production feedback that you do for the band? Do you do that for your graphics people, for your lighting people, well, whatever, for your
To
sound
some
people?
degree we do. I
Okay.
don't know if it's not the same structure as like within our band. We have pretty consistent feedback. We give it. I just don't know if there's good handrails and like when we are giving it. I think we know what we want. I think the challenge is like when we're giving it, how do we adjust that along the way? So we'll do active training. So on that Sunday, if we're mixing something, myself or one of the other production people might be there like, here's what we want. But I think even creating that same verbiage across all the people that hold a role on a Sunday, because one of the things one of our sound guys says, I get different feedback from different leaders about what it needs to be. So how do you be like, here's our standard, no matter what anybody says, here's what we're gonna do, and then we'll tweak that along the way.
We've had to
No, go ahead, Becky.
We've had to designate, like, there's specific people on staff. It's like, this person has good ear, like, these people can speak into the mix, and then other people, they need to filter their feedback through those specific people. Because that's happened too. People are getting different messages. We've just decided, okay, who gets to say and who doesn't, and then we sort of work it out. Is that helpful?
I also get feedback. And I give feedback too. And I feel like in my head, I don't even know if I could describe exactly how, like if I had to put it on paper, how we should mix, you know, I could probably write something, but I'm constantly giving feedback and letting my audio guy, my lead audio guy, give feedback also. If somebody comes up to the booth, I talk to them, and if they're like, it's too loud or whatever, which is usually the problem. Sometimes it's, you know, I can't hear the speaker, but, so I'll just say like, thank you, I'll pass that along to our team. You know, I understand what you're saying, just try to be pastoral. That's me trying to be pastoral. And then we have a meeting every Monday where we debrief the whole Sunday experience, and then we debrief the production aspect. So I don't say much in the whole Sunday experience usually, because no one wants to hear about what you know what I'm saying. It's like, okay, sounded good, check, great. And then a lot of times we'll have production feedback like, hey, on the stage plot we didn't have this, so we had to take more time to set up this gear and whatever. Or like, we didn't know that this was going to happen in the service or whatever. So I feel like a part of that team. I don't know how what your structure allows for with your band and your production. Do you see a way forward in that with your sound people?
I think it's good if we have, because I think as a band we give pretty consistent feedback. I think we can do the same thing. Like that's just good to even set a time, because we debrief our Sundays every Tuesday for a few hours. So, but then if we did that just on our production side with our audiovisual band, like that piece of it, which we don't really do that right now, I think would be helpful. Even just to give more ownership to the people that are, because we're trying to develop enough people so our one great guy can train and develop and not have to be there every single Sunday.
Right.
So it's like, we all love it, it's great.
Right.
So there's that consistency across the board.
Jonathan in Baton Rouge made a production feedback like form, so that after every Sunday, even people that have jobs and can't be there, like the sound people, can give feedback, and then they can receive that feedback through like who oversees them, you know.
That's great.
So, you know, if it's 2 thumbs up, or if it's like, hey, you know, why did we have feedback at this point? And then if it becomes a consistent issue, it's like, okay, what do we need to do to fix this?
Right.
How can we make sure the recording happens?
Right, yeah. And then it's tangible. And you have something you can go back on.
Yeah.
Instead of like, well, I've been telling you like 7 times not to do that. And they're like, well, that's not what I received. And then it just gets hairy. It's
Yeah,
like, well,
that's
no,
good.
we actually have it documented.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Because you put your name on it. Like, I have a full-time job, but I volunteer for worship.
That's
But
good.
I put my name, and if maybe I'm not one of the people for a certain thing, I still make a comment
Right.
out of anger or something, like ask for repentance later. But then it's like, okay, well, we can take that feedback, but you can filter it because you know where it's coming
Yeah,
from.
even this, it's the whole Sunday experience. I was like, we need to do that because, you know, it was like, how was the message? How was the, like, did the kids' area feel like chaotic, or did it feel peaceful, even though we had 900 children? Literally, 900. Yeah.
Is this forum for anybody in the church?
No.
People on your production team?
No, it's people on the team to
Okay.
give feedback about
Gotcha.
every area.
They're
of
often
the-
volunteers.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's like not.
But yeah, it's not just staff that
Okay,
fills
good.
it out.
I'm like, this is like something that I'm like, I totally want to use. Because we've started having more production meetings on Wednesdays of like fixing stuff like that. Of like, we had this go on, people didn't go up, these people didn't sit on the ends,
Right.
and they had to go across everyone. And
Okay.
so,
Yep.
stuff like this, small stuff like that, we want to fix.
3 minutes. More questions. We'll try to be quick.
So I have a question. What made me think of it is like, I think some of us get a big chunk of money to make an additional.
Yeah,
like
I haven't
we
gotten a
talked
dime since. So.
about. Well, right, and then we have maybe a.
Good thing you bought good
I
stuff.
know, right?
Well, good. And then we have sort of the, you know, budget year to year, so
Yeah.
I can relate to that kind of thing. My
100%.
question is like, what's the expectation in terms of like, how often does this equipment turn over? Like, is it, because I do want to be investing and using some of my money year to year, because there are things that are going to break and need to be, so like, is it that every 5 years, 10 years, you'll need to like do a redo of all your equipment, or what's realistic in the sound tech equipment world?
Oh gosh, good question. It needs, okay, installed PA. I hope that we don't replace this until year 8, or at least like get a, you know, it's got parts that wear out. The speakers hanging in the main auditorium. You have parts that wear out, and things that get misaligned. I mean, it's a physical object, so it wears out, right? I would say, yeah, between 5 and 10 years for your big pieces like a console. 10 years is a little long, honestly. That's why I was asking initially about the expense versus capital thing, you know, because your supplies and all that stuff versus like a big purchase, which is a multi-year purchase. So I would say general rule of thumb, I would expect, like you can see some dents on those speakers, the top ones. They work
We
fine.
can't see them.
But you can buy new grills, right? Like new.
Yeah, we had a problem where we thought one of the woofers was like, and it was just the grill, the cloth on the back of the grill, which is like,
Wow.
it was like $20-something
Right.
to buy. Anyway, it's a $1,500 speaker, so that was an easy fix. But we also, even after, you know, the 5 years or whatever, and you buy something new, you're going to use that thing somewhere else, hopefully. Like I said, our 20-year-old wedding system, which, you know, so I think another principle I try to do to follow is like when we buy something new, usually it's for the big system, and then we take stuff from that and push it down to other systems. Instead of like, I'm gonna spend a ton of money on this small venue, I mean, obviously I'm, you know, but you could consider it like your main system versus like your portable system. You could think of it that way. You don't necessarily wanna be like, hey, we're gonna buy an awesome portable system and we're just gonna kind of schlep along with the main system. You probably wanna be like, okay, what in our main system is like worn out?
Right.
That still works, and we're just gonna push that in the portable system. That's how I think, because I think like we're always in a growth mentality. Like I'm thinking, we're always gonna grow, maybe slower or faster, but we don't wanna like shoot ourselves in the foot by sort of aiming low.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. It is 2:45. I'm gonna leave you with this. We all have to. You're talking about submitting things to elders. We're talking about budgets, things that feel restricting or restrictive to us as worship leaders. When like all we want to do is provide the best for our people. And I heard Andrew Zanacco say this about a month ago, and he's a pastor of Antioch, Indianapolis, and he was like, we often, for whatever reason in the church, we don't like to talk about money because it's weird or whatever in the church. He's like, but you talk about it and it consumes your life for 6 days. So actually we actually should talk about it in a really healthy way on Sundays, because that's like a place where it can be redeemed in a sense and give us a new perspective. When I say that when saying you're gonna have to present to elders, and don't be afraid of numbers. Like it is the hardest thing to do to have a mentality. Like ask for the moon, ask for it, and if you believe in it, you're in a trusted place. They love you, they trust you. You would not be on stage if they didn't love and trust you. And so just from experience, go for it. Like, and it might not happen. Like, you might get a % of what you ask for. But they're also in the middle of that, they're gonna see that you care and that you're invested and that you have dreams and visions and you're wanting to take this thing forward. So it's gonna do a lot in two ways. You might get what you asked for, but you're also depositing a ton of value, and they're gonna see you and trust you a lot more. So maybe next year they're like, they've been harping on this for like 365 days, and not like in a I demand this, but like just if it's in you and you really want it and you feel like it's from this is going to help us move forward in the church, and you believe in it and you've got a clear go from God, then like go for it. Because I think that whether it's your elders, whether your pastor, your staff, I think when they see worship leaders valuing the equipment, they're going to be more likely to invest in those things instead of like we just needed something. Like we just needed something. We just needed to put something up. And I think that's the hardest thing for me, because I was like, it didn't help me when I say I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I had to come and say, hey, I really want this to get better. I really want this to grow. I'm asking these questions. I'm asking for these resources. I want this to grow. And it's just been really interesting. Whether I got what I asked for or not, it's been really helpful for people or for me to feel like I have more trust from my elders, which we don't have elders in the moment. Ask them about it later. Or like from our senior leadership team to say like, when you talk about sound equipment, when you talk about capital expensive, like if you went, like Adam's like, I need new speakers. If he was just like, I think it would be good, they're gonna be like, okay, bye. Like, but if you're like, hey, this would do this, this, and this, and this, I've really prayed about it, not throwing the God card out, but I've sought the Lord, I've sought wise counsel, please consider. I think that goes a long way as well. Just worship leaders valuing the sound side of things will go a long way.
I've kind of come to that realization with our leadership team, because I tend to be an idea person where I'm like, yeah, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great.
Solutions, man.
And you just throw it at these people. And we have a lot of Enneagram 5s where they want all of the information, and like they want to make a decision off of like all the information given, and I'm just like shooting out ideas. They're like, yeah, bye.
Right.
So I'm like, I realized like I can't just be like, hey, this is a cool idea.
Right.
I have to like almost like a proposition, like you said, like type up, this is why this is a good idea.
Right.
And as a like kind of like go with the flow, easy flow guy, it's really hard.
Yeah, for sure.
You can be like, hey bro, Blanton told me to buy 4 subs because 2 is just a little bit better.
There you go. That's it.
Seriously though, I'm happy to be a resource for anybody if it's helpful. And yeah, you got the Excel spread. I'm still not sure.
I have it.
Awesome.
I have the Excel spreadsheet.
From years ago.
Yes, for
I
sure.
think one thing I've learned is having a proposal where you can answer the question why.
Yeah.
It's a pain, but it's stewardship.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you have like, if you can't answer the question why to somebody who doesn't know anything,
Right.
then there's a problem
Right.
with your process. And you
Yeah,
can-
it's really good. And even if you don't get what you asked for, you now have a deeper value for what you're desiring. And so I think that goes a long way too. Cool.
Well done.
Way to go, guys. Thanks for being here. Love you guys. See ya. Let's ask Jay Thomas the best questions ever.